Hello all, welcome to RPG with DBJ. I'm your host DBJ, and this week we're talking about, it's been known by different words, but of course teleportation, portals, warp holes, wormholes, those kind of things. And while often used quite regularly when it comes to a background or mission statement type of adventuring for tabletop RPGs, i.e., hey, go through the portal and find a thing, or there's a portal spilling out creatures, you need to run away. I thought we could talk about it a little bit in a little more depth. This really came up, the idea of doing this came about. I was listening to an audiobook and a little bit old. Dan Simmons' Hyperion, and in this far-flung world, there are things known as farcasters. Now, this has been done plenty of times. Hey, Scott, what's up? And it's been done plenty of times in science fiction and, video games. I'm going to bring up Portal as one of those video games, but where there are various means to travel from one place to another without actually having to travel between the intervening space. And I thought we would try to talk about this instead of the hyperspace engine used in a vehicle kind of manner. Let's get a little bit more personal. Basically player characters versus NPCs versus other player characters, and make it a little bit more grounded, more personal. Grounded in the literal sense, people being able to transport themselves from one place to another, and how we can use it in the games, the problems they have in games and in tabletop games, and then not just, not doing the simple, hey, if you don't want to have those problems, don't use it. Instead of doing that, to come up with some new ideas. And of course, absolutely positively find all the stories that we can come up with and that kind of thing. Now, today is Monster Monday. And Monster Monday, we absolutely deal with, of course, monsters. And we're going to talk about NPCs and adversaries and enemies. There's differences between the two and that kind of thing. So, of course, no matter where your role-playing setting takes place, sometimes you need to get something there to confound your players. Yeah, Pelor says displacer beasts, easy points. Yeah, sometimes the origins of creatures. I love myself some displacer beasts. The origins of some of these creatures really is pretty problematic, and so of course you have yourself, well, these things got here through a portal of some sort. Now, as a side note, I do know that displacer beasts do not have the ability to teleport, but they always seem to be where they need to be. And it's possible that they have a natural affinity for finding how places of thin membranes for them to go from one place to another, which is a good way to explain how some of your big nasties get from one place to another. Of course, you have yourself your classic cultist, part of Call of Cthulhu or Cthulhuoid imagery, trying to sacrifice little babies while the PCs go and bash their heads in before the cultists are able to complete the ritual to open the portal to allow pure insane evil to step through to our world. And while a trope, it does kind of add together. It does add together a little bit of well, it's a trope because it works. You have yourself some evil people that we really don't care. We want to open up a can of whoop ass on them. We do have ourselves time tension, where you need to stop at least most of them, or rescue the innocents, or put down the bad guys or something before the thing happens. You have a little bit of investigation inside of those kind of things. Yeah, you know what? I was thinking the same thing. Pelor says they can't teleport? Well, that's just BS. My life is a lie. Yeah. And Joseph Keenan says, displacer beast, there's only one. It's just in multiple places at once. You know what? Years ago we had this conversation that there's literally just one displacer piece and one blink dog, and the rest of them are just like out literally living out of time and place where they are. Um, exactly. And Dead Man says cats do similar things. Ever try to figure out how the cat got past the closed door? Yeah. Why do you think they're always hanging around the murder victims or something in locked rooms? You're just like, what the hell? Just say, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Why is the cat there? Oh, I love myself some Displacer Beast. It's just anyway. So Plur says, I swear I thought they could teleport. They're so much less awesome without being teleporty. Well, I don't know about that. The dis, their displacement of where they are truly at and where you think they're at kind of brings up the idea of teleportation. If we want to go towards some kind of like movie or imagery or something, I remember the badly executed but really fun movie Jumper really has a lot to do with like being able to transport yourself from one place to another. Um, there's the idea in science fiction as well as having like anything from teleportation doorways um, to Star Trek using the transporters and things like that. And where instead of a doorway that you walk through from one place to another, there's, of course, you can't forget, you can't forget, why, now my brain forgot it. Um, um, oh, it was on forever. And my brain just went away because I'm reading and, anyway, Polor says, Nabuvian wives have a portal to an extra-dimensional plane in their womb. They seduce someone to fertilize them, then the gestation period is a portal opening and a creature coming through. That's nasty. What the hell? I like that. I like that a lot. Um, Joe Key says, don't use countdown timers. It's a poor tension builder when overused. Cthulhu Doctor Who episode. Oh, I'm sorry. Chitnall Doctor Who episodes. Everyone he writes has a countdown. Oh, yeah, yeah. Um, the, what Joseph Keenan is talking about are countdown timers. We the most common use is like the bomb, right? The things get bad when the countdown timer goes down to 0, and you have to do X before Y happens because Z is going to happen because of the countdown timer. And yeah, it's yes, I agree. I absolutely agree with you that if it's overused, any trope that's overused is a very poor thing. We often see that in drama shows, right? The idea of the two people that have googly eyes over the countertop at each other, and they spend like 5 seasons trying to get those characters together. They put lots of barriers in front of them. They finally get together, and then of course you have to throw some monkey wrenches in to separate them again because it's drama. And so when you overuse a particular trope, hell yeah, it's like, okay, are we doing this again? Um, Dead Man the Storyteller says the novels set around the Jumper series were good. I actually have them. Jumper, Reflex. There's like 4 or 5 of them based on different characters. And it actually goes in places that even the movies didn't go, which is kind of cool. Rickard says, I'm going to weigh in more on this in World Building Wednesday. Yeah, hell yeah. Sliders is very good. Yep. And Plur says, that's Numenera base book. Yo, I didn't know it was in Numenera. I don't remember that. I don't own the Numenera book, but I got a chance to read through it quite a bit. I don't have the PDF. Rickard says, the problem counter is that it's a tension builder for the viewers, not so much the characters involved. Sometimes I would say I absolutely agree that if you're a writer and you fall back on that, not too good. And also It also is bad if it's not used in a manner in which we aren't able to. There isn't any other dynamic going on while that's being used, right? The cut the wire before it explodes thing is, it's literally, let's look at the tension timer and try to stop the tension timer, and you know it's going to be done in 1 second, right? I mean, that's just the thing. And uh, like, I love the movie Winter Soldier, but they had a tension timer at the end of the movie, and I kind of rolled my eyes at it. I think it's like a 99% excellent movie, better than it needed to be. And then when they added that tension timer in it, I was like, it's literally a timer counting down the one. And of course, everybody has to stop it at one. And it might be 1.3 seconds, it might be zero point 0.7 seconds or something, but they always do that. But there are other ways to do tension timers, especially since we're talking about teleportation and portals and things like that. And of course, the one, the most basic one is stop it before the portal opens and things come through, right? But playing with that, you can also have a portal that's already open and the nasties are already spilling through, and then the timer isn't necessarily wrapped around shutting the portal down, which you can absolutely do. But it can also be about, hey, we can't stop the stuff that's coming through the portal. Let's at least get done what we need to get done because we'll be overrun, And then that way you can actually confront the tension timer that you're using, you know what I mean? Without it being the focus, it happens to be in the background, and then players in themselves can choose to do that. I think it's far better done in war movies. In war movies, those timers are done quite often when it comes to enemy attacks, or being entrenched and being overrun, or being targeted by some kind of like massive attack that's sweeping across the landscape, and the individuals needing to do something before something happens. There's also the grenade down into the bunker idea. Explosive falls down in a bunker like a grenade or whatever, and then everyone tries to make a scramble for it before it goes boom. So anyway, yeah, of course, Scott says, the overused trope, which is a trope itself, right? Oh, especially when the characters in a story actually mention the trope being used, is pretty funny as well, which makes you wonder, like, the minute you start being self-referential about the trope itself, you might want to not use it any longer, but whatever. Rickard says, let's face it, if you're defusing a bomb, you already have a lot of tension there. If you're the one diffusing it, yeah, you don't need to have it also counting down to one as well. Yeah. Let me see if I can do this right. Captain, the Technobabble, is stopping us from beaming up. How many times did Trek need to stop the easy way out because of transporters? Yeah, that's a problem when you, well, as creators, they were like, okay, we need a good way, and very easy way, and very fast way to get the characters from one place to another, right? So you're in a spaceship, you go to these alien worlds. We just want to, it's like, do we need landing craft and all that? No, let's just say that they get there. So you have a transporter, and we're like, yay! And then everyone knows the transporter is the easy button. And you're like, we have to come up. The nebula is creating some kind of interference. We can only beam up 2 of you at the same time, Dead Man says the chunky salsa effect from Shadowrun. Chunky salsa. That's pretty nasty. But yes, there seems to be, unfortunately, a terrible idea is to add in some kind of capability to, like, whether it's a tabletop game, whether it's a story or a movie or what have you, and then you spend your entire time having to write in the limitations of that ability because you don't want the easy button. I'm looking at you, Superman. Yeah, you often have to come up with these, you have to finagle these ways to confound the system to make the tension happen. Otherwise, you can just defeat it. I mean, how many times have we seen Star Trek and we're like, if they can beam people, why wouldn't they just beam a bomb down to the world and be done with it? You know, how many player characters are like, I'm just going to teleport in, shoot everyone, and teleport back out? You know, that kind of thing. Yeah. Pillar says, I had a faction that could use them as per magic. The players couldn't do it, and the faction hardly ever used them. Yeah, if the PCs don't have access to it, that's one thing. But you know, player characters are like, if if a nuclear bomb exists in the world, they're going to want it. If a teleporter exists in the world, they're going to get it. It's like they're going to figure out a way to get at it. Period. It's just a PC thing, right? Player character thing. Rickard says also time doesn't flow as clearly in tabletop RPGs, so timers or time windows aren't as organic in tabletop RPGs. I've heard of people suggesting that people use like sand timers and phone timers and things, but I agree it doesn't. It's a little heavy-handed and clunky because players at tables don't think in the same time frame that the action stars are thinking in the situations they're in, because a character with, say, a very extremely high intelligence, while 5 people could be talking about the next action at the table, almost metagaming it, if you want to call it metagaming, the character with the 18 intelligence, or whatever the intelligence rating it is for your game, would have gone through all those scenarios possibly in an instant. So yeah, time doesn't quite work. Timers don't quite work that way. It's better to have a timer that's based on like combat rounds, like days, months, days, hours, minutes, and that kind of thing. Although, having timers based on combat rounds actually kind of works, because everyone knows that if you don't do this thing, this other thing will happen. And based on that, you can modulate it. For example, we're talking about teleportation, so if you can give clues as to the portal opening into the netherworld or something, and flames shooting forth and a big hand coming out, and you see the forehead and the giant horns of the demonic creature starting to come out of the portal. If the players know it's going to open up in 3 rounds, then they can run around and do whatever they need to do, because on the 3rd round they know, all hell's going to break loose, literally and figuratively. So I don't disagree with you, but I just think it's how we wrap our narrative around it. And of course, not overusing it. Now, Joseph Keaton says your PC's turned into the Tuvek Nelox hybrid. I'm not sure what that's from, but it sounds familiar. Okay, Rickard says take a teleportation window that lasts for 2 hours after they teleport in. You don't have a clear idea on how long it takes you to complete any one thing in game time. I hear where you're going, but see, I'm a glass half full person. It's not, instead of glass half empty. Sure, there's a problem, but you don't throw out the tool because of its misuse. In all tropes, when misused, are bad, not just timers in role-playing games. So I'm not going to dispute that when used wrong, it's wrong, but everything is done that way. If you overeat on any particular one food item, it's bad, but you don't not eat that food item. You go, gotta use it sparingly and reframe it. Every story's already been told. Every framing mechanism's already been used. It's how you use it. So sure, why not? Yeah. And yeah, tabletop games, timing in tabletop games will never be exact. You can't play you can't play 24, the TV show, the role playing game, and literally play every scene out. Hey, every gaming session is going to be in game exactly as long as we play. You can't do that. But whatever. There's also something called the imagination. So yeah. Plur says what it was an assassin's guild who had their hideout deep underground, only accessible by portals behind their fronts, one being a carpentry workshop. The leader could open up ad hoc portals as well. Oh, you mean like the hidden location only accessible by portals? Yeah, that's and now mind you, that's a thing, right? Where you get more of a social and exploration action in your world, where in order to get to the bad guys base, basically you have to figure out where and or if and or where their portals are at, whether is it something they naturally are able to do they have to set them up, are they in specific locations, is there a key, a physical key like a medallion, an actual key, a code number, a thumbprint, a ring or tiara or something that can get you to activate it? Is it based on a timing procedure, like only done during the full moon or whatever? That kind of thing before the portal opens up. And then this way you can have enemies continually going after the PCs, with the PCs not understanding where the enemies are coming from. But they always seem to be there or be around the corner. And then once the PCs realize that, well, in order to defeat this enemy, yeah, we can fight them in the streets or fight them in the wild or whatever, what have you. But at some point, we're going to have to confront them on their home base. And then that could be its own reward for the PCs to get there. But, yep, absolutely. Scott Post says, without turning a thing off, you can fix the easy button by adding a cost to the use, either an actual resource cost or it's dangerous and requires skill checks. I'm with you on that, Scott. Like, I mean, if you think about it, that's one of the things that you'll see added into most of your sci-fi things, where it's like, hey, let's take the trope of hyperspace, right? Starships need to go from one place to another fast. So you go, okay, well, we're going to come up with this fictional hyperspace, Hawking Drive, wormhole, etc. And then what do? Well, the writers or creators or something will add in a very high fuel cost. Hey, we can hyperspace, but when we get there, we've run out of fuel. We can't just do it again. Sometimes it's location. You can hyperspace to the outer rim of a solar system, but you can't do it near planetary sources. You have skill checks, right? You need to program the navigation system, or you're going to slam into a sun or a nebula or an asteroid. There are pilots that may have to literally pilot through fourth and fifth and sixth dimensional space, so you have to worry about that. There are accuracy issues. Hey, we can get within a 30-kilometer range to transport you down, but no closer. There's the in the more medieval settings of transporting yourself, there is magical acuity. So someone's like, yes, we can teleport ourselves out of this dungeon, but where we end up, not so certain, since I don't know where we're going. So yeah, and the thing is that if you add a cost, and like you said, that resource could be, I normally default to time, energy, and resources. So is it that you can only transport at specific times, or there is a time period gap between doing it once and again? So you can transport yourself once, but you cannot transport yourself. You cannot open a portal, let's say, in less than 7 days, or until the next full moon, or the next solstice, or 24 hours, or whatever the case may be, after a long rest or a short rest, kind of thing, right? There is a time factor. You use it once, and then that cost, you have that time cost. You do have an energy cost, physical energy, exhaustion, blindness, paralysis, headaches, confusion. This person's I can transport you there, but when I get there, then when they get there, they've retched and they're in pain and are curled up in a fetal position or something. Okay, and then you got time, you got your energy, and then you have your resources. And resources could be money, dilithium crystals, things like that. So and if you mix and match, you can kind of confound those things, especially if you want to give the players the ability to use them. Rickard says, no, but you would have a problem with the players not knowing how much of a window their actions take. You're talking about like a 2 hour window or something like that. I don't, like I said, I don't disagree with you, but I would suggest not using it if the only thing you can think about are the problems involved in it, as opposed to like that's where a 2 hour window is more of a narrative thing, right? It's basically moving at the speed of plot. When you start getting down to like combat rounds, it's a timer. Combat rounds are timers. That's why you have initiative, and you roll to see who goes first and who goes second. And the game has to figure out a way to time all the actions. So once it gets down to that point, then it's like, oh, you're trying to run to the starship before it takes off, and you're fighting in the Death Star, and you're shooting the enemies. We have to run to our spaceship before the portal closes. They closed at the outer blast doors or something like that, right? And then in that way, you're working more on a round by round, action by action economy, and you can ramp the tension up further than saying 2 hours, because in a role playing game, 2 hours you can hand wave that away and it's done in an instant, or it could take 3 gaming sessions to have 2 hours go by. Plur says there are a couple of books which have a faster travel world. The Warrens in Malazan or Malazan, or the one from Wheel of Time, basically portal into a world, walk in the shadow world, arrive faster. Oh, Worlds Out of Time. That's a thing as well, right? Like a person goes into another world, they spend their entire lifetime there, 30, 40, 50 years. They come back and no time has passed. That's the thing. Plur says similar to the warp in Star Wars, but just for people. But yes, there's also the trope of, because sometimes people, the joke is that how fast does it take to warp between worlds, and it's the speed of plot, right? So when you see a starship warp from one place to another, the amount of relative time within the warp could be as long as you want it to be, right? Is it an instant, or does the ship transfer instantly, but it takes 3 hours inside the starship, inside the wormhole? You don't know. I mean, what I'm saying is, in your own world, you can decide how long that is, but story-wise, it's more or less speed of plot. You see the ship disappear instantly and arrive instantly, but the internal time mechanism is usually just enough to get a scene where everyone gets to talk and they fix whatever's broken. There's some drama involved. Someone's oiling their guns. Someone else is looking over important artifacts or something, and then they arrive, right? Rickard says if you'd been there in real time, a 2 hour time window works without problems. Of course. Yeah. Now, unless you're LARPing, I suppose you could kind of do something like that if you're LARPing. Plur says hyperspace, not the warp. Plur, get your head in the game. You're fine. Plur says just while I'm thinking of it, the glitchy horror teleports. Yeah, I know what trope you're talking about. We'll talk about that one as well. Deadman says FASA had the Kinney Vachita drive abbreviated as the FK drive in BattleTech. I didn't know that. Today, I think I've heard a lot of writers will default to a Hawking styled drive because of Hawking the scientist. I'm sure somebody will come up whoever designs that system, if they have a pretty cool last name, or multiple designers came up with that last name, or it was done by committee or something, they'll name it after that person. But yeah, starships and things always have those drives. Now, Pelora uh, says that is talking about the glitchy horror teleports. Now, if you don't know, glitchy horror teleports are like innocent person runs away from evil creature stands there or walks very slowly, person runs at hyper panic speeds, trips and falls, looks back, sees creature very far away, scrambles themselves up to their feet, looks back again, creature is gone. They turn forward, they bump face forward into creature, who then hacks them with whatever sharp instrument they have to use for themselves. You know, meat hook, machete, etc., etc., right? And it's, yeah, it's, that trope has been used so often that it's actually been made fun of in movies, a la Scream and other movies where they actually point that out. But there are some monsters and such that actually have the ability to transport themselves. I'm looking at you, Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, the Misty Step ability. Basically, I think you can transport, what is it, like 30 feet without having to move between an intervening space. It's basically the X-Men's Nightcrawler ability, or close enough to it, right? It's very short range teleport. I can go from behind this wall to up in the rafters and no one sees me do it. And it can be described in different ways. I transform myself into mist. I turn into a pile of leaves and blow into this other section. I walk into the ethereal plane as a ghost and reappear somewhere else. I step through a magical portal or a shadow or realm, or a beam of light makes me disappear from here and I appear somewhere else. I turn into a bolt of lightning and just like arc through the air to appear somewhere else or something like that. You can always describe it different ways, but that's basically what your teleportation is. I think one thing that surprises me quite a bit in role-playing games when it comes to personal, private transportation is that there aren't very many countermeasures to it, much like there aren't countermeasures to cantrips in Dungeons and Dragons, which kind of bothers me a little bit, because we all know that it exists in the game, and we all know there are problems in the game. I'm surprised they didn't come up with far more countermeasures to it, considering that beings in the game would be using them and countermeasuring them against themselves. Much like countermeasuring the ability to be scryed by opponents, same thing. The Kearney Fachita drive for battle text, the KF drive. And now Tesla says, Rickard says, for combat timers work great because it's in real time, hashtag real time. Yeah, it's a above board player thing, right? Everyone knows, okay, if this thing, whatever happens, the portal opens and demons come through, we need to activate the portal, and because the planet is falling in on itself, we are in another plane of existence, or whatever the case may be. If you know what's going to happen, whatever it's going to happen on round 3, then that above board timer at the table works. But I hear you, when you start talking like, oh, in 2 hours, it's like, what does 2 hours feel like for my character? I couldn't tell you that. Tesla says that's actually a special move in the Friday the 13th video game. The PCs can always run away from Jason, but he can teleport ahead of them when they get far enough to be out of sight of him. Yeah, now, honestly, you can make, and okay, follow me on this. You could actually design a game whose special abilities in the game are the tropes of that setting. So the trope of the bad guy teleporting when you can't see them, and they can't see you, as a trope in itself could be a character and or enemy actual gaming trait, right? It's like in an action movie when the hero rips their shirt open and says bulletproof vest, and you see the bullets fall off of the vest, even though everyone's like, oh my god, they've been shot, and the maverick cop never wears a bulletproof vest, and then the shotgun blast them through the glass and everyone thinks they're dead, and then one of their allies comes around the corner. You could have a series of thematic tropish traits, and including the teleport after falling out of the window trope, the teleport when no one can see you trope, the run around the corner and disappear into the crowd teleportation trope. What's another teleport trope? The having something thrown in the face, and then when the thing is removed from the face, they've disappeared trope. The standing still in a city crowd trope, bus drives by trope, disappear trope. Bus, subway, taxi, crowd closing in around you, disappear trope is a thing, and I don't know, you could make those real special abilities, kind of, you know. Hell, in Vampire the Masquerade, one of the lowest level abilities was for obfuscate, was the stand still in a crowd and be invisible trope, or the stand behind a minimal amount of cover and no one will see you trope, special ability. So yeah. Pelor says Damon's portal into the real world. That's not a particularly original one. Probably mentioned earlier already. This is the basis for Doom, like harvesting energy through the portal. But oh no, we're all buggered. Yeah, yeah. The we're going to use a portal to acquire some special resource, and ooh, maybe we should close the portal now. But we're so used to having the portal open, so yeah. Yeah, exactly. Rickard says you could do plot time with skill challenges to check how long time is given how long time a given section takes for the players. Timekeeping devices and clever solutions giving them a bonus to the roll. Oh yes. You could, like you're saying, like you could modulate the time it takes to do something by having skill challenges to have that thing done. It's the we need to close the door before the rushing fluid, the escaping air, the creatures coming through the portal attack us, so someone needs to make an engineering roll, skill challenge, and maybe they need to have 3 successes to do so. And so how long does it take? Well, once they're able to successfully reprogram the machine, or recite the ritual or something, and perform that 3 successful times, that's how long it takes. Without adding an actual timer, it takes as long as it takes to be done successfully 3 times, right? And doing that, like you said, giving bonuses for clever solutions. Someone says, hey, I'm going to wedge the door closed with a chalk, or I'm going to distract the enemy with noises so you guys can get your thing done. I'm going to call up the schematics so it's easier for you to reprogram the doors to shut closed, things like that. And then giving, like you said, giving the players some form of benefit for clever ideas. I'm with you on that. I'm so with you. And honestly, actually, you mentioned something, Rickard, about skill challenges. That's not used often, which is weird because most games' skill challenges are in parity to their combat challenges, meaning the same bonuses and penalties for hitting somebody about the head and shoulders are the same bonuses and penalties for computer programming, leaping and running, convincing someone of something, hiding, moving a heavy object, uh, pickpocketing an object, palming an object, and so no one sees it. Um, wearing a disguise, all those kind of things, all the other skills that are available, but we don't put as much emphasis on the use of the other skills as having as much of an impact as hitting somebody about the head and shoulders, which I think is kind of a shame. That's why I'm a dictator. I am your self-appointed third pillarist. Pelor says, "Ooh, minimum range or fixed range teleports." That is minimum range and fixed range teleporting does work because and there's a difference between the two. So minimum range teleports would be, let's say, whatever method you have to teleport is only at a minimum of, say, 1 kilometer or 1 mile or something, which means that you couldn't do it in combat to get behind an opponent who's only, I don't know, 12 paces away from you, because if you step through or you activate the teleportation, you will transport yourself line of sight 1 kilometer away, which is kind of useless if you're trying to get behind your enemy. Now, if you're trying to escape, sure, but then maybe in this world, the enemy knows that you can only transport yourself exactly 1 kilometer away, and all they have to do is triangulate your 1 kilometer disappearance and then arrive there. Now, fixed range teleports work the same way, in which using the 1 kilometer idea, maybe the minimum range is 1 kilometer, the maximum can be as far as you need. Much like, I guess, going back to the starship idea, like maybe you cannot work within a planetary system. So, for example, in our own solar system, our own earthly solar system, you couldn't transport yourself in a starship, say, from Mars to Saturn, but you could do it from, say, any planetary location here to Alpha Centauri, right? You can't do it any shorter, but you can go much further than that period of time, that gap in space. You know what I mean? Yeah, Ricker says, so you game the system with always having them in sight, but at a healthy distance. Yeah, I knew you were talking to Tesla, but yep, I know players would do that. Yeah, I'm just going to teleport out of range and stay out of range and snipe them the whole time, Um, Rickard says the Batman vanish is a good teleportation trope. Hell yeah. Come, the Batman fading into the shadow or fading back into the shadow. Well, oh no, he fades from shadow behind the bad guys after he kicks their ass, and you get that one guy who's panicked with the sweat on the brow and the upper lip with their gun shaking, and he teleports behind them. He just happens to appear out of the shadow behind them. And then, of course, when he's talking to Commissioner Gordon, he always fades shadows when Commissioner Gordon is in the middle of a sentence, which I think would be pretty hilarious if Commissioner Gordon's like, yeah, thanks for ditching out on me, Batman, but I wasn't finished my statement. uh, he's like, I'm not going to get to the important stuff to keep you from disappearing. Um, Scott Poe says, while Jason games the system by intentionally going slow or ducking out of sight. Yep. It sure is. He's like, I'm just going to stand here and let them run for it. So once they can't see me, I can teleport in front of them. Because if I chased after them with my movement rate, I would never catch them this way. which I suppose if you were playing Jason the tabletop RPG game or Mysterious Killer the RPG game, role playing game, yeah, I think so. Or tabletop RPG. Excuse me. Rickard says, or going back to the 2-hour window, each scene takes time based on a skill check with bonuses on how they do it. Basically, setting how much of their time resource it eats up. Ooh, now, the skill challenge time resource thing actually works too, meaning, for example, like you said with the 2-hour window, each skill challenge success or failure could eat up, say, half an hour or 10 minutes or so. Or you could modulate how much of a success or failure they do and how much time is eaten up in that 2-hour window. So for every success is a half an hour. If you fail, it eats an hour or something. Well, maybe that's a little too short, but you get my point. See, 10-minute windows would be 12 possible success failure rates involved in that. So, and then with a number of player characters, some doing investigation, programming, reading ancient tomes, scouting, and things like that. Yeah, I would actually, I would add a cost skill parity with that. All right, so doing this is going to take you 10 minutes. Make a roll. If you fail, that's 10 minutes you've wasted. You can roll again. 2 hours is creeping in on you, kind of thing. Yeah. Deadman says the DC Superheroes RPG had an option to take a minimum maximum range for abilities. I don't remember that. I think you're referring to. I think you're referring to the idea much. How to say? There are games where they allow you to take. In Dungeons and Dragons, well, I think it's Pathfinder, you could take 10 and take 20, which is essentially you don't roll for your. Instead of rolling the dice because a success or failure is unimportant or isn't very dramatic. Instead, given enough time and or resources, it's accepted that you will have a certain amount of success or failure. So much like a person who is building a house, you don't finish building the house and make a skill roll for carpentry, right? Because if someone screws up on nailing a board into the side of the house, they have enough time and energy and resources to pull the nail out, make sure the board is level, and then put another nail into the board, right? You don't build a whole house, make a skill roll, and see if the house falls down. Much like everyone that drives to work, how many skill rolls do you make driving? Most of us, come to a stop. Green light, you start to go. Turn signal, flow into traffic, slow down, speed up. Most of that is what you could kind of consider passive skill use. So yeah. Deadman says the DC Superheroes RPG was built on the Mutants and Mastermind system. I'm going to challenge you in a silly way there, Deadman. I like the old Mayfair exponential 2D10 system. I missed that one, and so before Marvel and DC, I remember the old Marvel Face Rip and the DC. What was the Mayfair system called? I can't remember, but yeah. Plurus says a good prison idea: create 2 portals, a la Portal the video game, and make people fall endlessly. There's also the idea of using those portals to create loop worlds. So, for example, you could have in the audiobook that I'm listening to, and I actually physically read the books before, but in the Hyperion series, they had a river that ran eternally through like dozens and dozens of worlds, and you could sail your boat through these giant farcasters, and the river flowed from planet to planet, and it was a jungle planet, and a desert planet, and a plateau planet and stuff. And you could walk. Some people even had homes whose doorways were farcasters, so you could have your bathroom on one world floating on a raft in a vast ocean or something, and then when you leave the bathroom, you walk through the farcaster into a high gravity world where you have your exercise room, and then you could walk through another farcaster that put you up in the the mile-high trees of the arboreal, arboreal six world or something like that. Like you had different. They were actually ubiquitous in this world. You had a card that you could just pass over, slide through, and type in where you wanted to go. I think the same system was used in the Ring World series. Yep. Ricker says going to have to bow out and get some practice time in during lunch. Catch you Wednesday. All right, man. Hey, have a great one. Scott Post says, DC Heroes. Googled. I didn't know. Yeah, there would. Listen, I'm old, so I know that. West End Games version, predecessor of the DC superhero system. And if I'm not mistaken, they actually came. I have the book, but I don't remember who wrote it. DC lost a battle with the creator of the rules for that exponential system, or actually, I guess you could call it AP system. So a human being had a strength or an AP of 2. A person who had an AP of 3 was twice as strong as the person with the 2, and so on. So if you follow that up, I believe Superman had a 25 strength. So if an average human being of 2, and you double that 3, and double that is 4, double that is 5, double that is 6, etc., etc., Superman had a strength of 25. That's, yeah, pretty nasty. Yep, there it is, Mayfair Games. I was wrong. Green Ronin DC Adventures. Yeah, I played the hell out of that game. I loved it so much. Anyway, creatures and people that Tesla says Superman was defined as 50. Oh, sorry, that was before the Man of Steel John Byrne run, and they lowered the strength down to 25. Yeah, it's a complicated thing. During the run of that game, the old school Superman did have a strength of 50, because I believe he could push the Earth or the moon or something. And then, yep, and even the Guardians of the Galaxy were way up there in terms of their powers and abilities. And then during the early 80s, John Byrne did a run on Man of Steel, or the series was called Man of Steel, and it was basically a reboot, like kind of how they do today. It was a reboot of the character, and they kind of like lowered his powers down, because you can't tell any. Superman is a terrible character to tell stories with. Great as a elemental force, terrible as a character. It's you could tell 50 more stories with Batman than you can Superman, just because of their abilities. Scott Post says, I played White Wolf's Aberrant superhero game. They did a good job in their D10 systems with it. Yeah. Pillar says, Superman is a terrible character. Yeah, I mean, I like the ideal of Superman. Believe you me, I've collected comic books, I've got T-shirts and things on the wall and stuff like that. But I think as a writer, sucks. Very few people are able to tell great Superman stories unless you break them apart in its component parts. Yeah, Puller's like, what an OP, little swear words. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And some people complain about Superman stories where they limit him, and I'm like, okay, so you just want a masturbatory story where Superman does everything all the time perfectly. It's like that's not a story. That's pleasuring yourself. That's, but anyway, sorry to get to go down that path, but I suppose this is a terrible Monster Monday because we really didn't talk about creatures from other worlds you can use while being transported from one place to another. It's a great trope to have something appear somewhere that it shouldn't be. It's also a great trope to get your NPCs and players from one place to another very quickly without having to worry about the intervening space. There's the idea of the creatures arriving somewhere, and how do I say that instead of the PCs going through a portal and being trapped, the enemy actually comes through a portal to where the PCs are located, and those creatures are trapped as well. There also may be a time limit as to how long those beings can last in this world and transport themselves, and then there's also how they are transported. Like, how much of a difference is there between a wormhole versus a warp door versus a teleportation, that kind of thing. Yeah, Pelora brings up Nightcrawler. Yeah, Scott Post says Superman is a cosmic level guy. He works better out doing cosmic level adventuring. I don't disagree with you. It's much like it's why there are very terrible Silver Surfer stories told with Silver Surfer on Earth. It makes no sense. Same thing with Thor as well, right? Um, Thor is always off doing some other thing, which is why he doesn't hang around the Avengers and on Earth all the time, because he's a cosmic level guy. It's better to tell cosmic level stories with those people off of the planet Earth and such, which, as a side note, because we're coming down to the hour mark, so this is where we like to devolve into randomness. But I ran a Fate game where the minimum level of capability of the players is that they could fly from galaxy to galaxy. It was basically, I think it was called Vanguardians, and the player characters had like uh, their powers had ranges like a city neighborhood, a continent, a planets level range, interplanetary from one planet to another, intergalactic ranges. Like there were things like that. So yeah. Tessa says, nope, you're right. Superman is 25, Superboy is 22, Wonder Woman 16, Batman has 5 strength. Well, I wasn't necessarily, neither one of us were right or wrong. Those stats actually, Superman did have a 50 strength. And then during the heyday of the comic books at that time, they re-released Superman's capabilities. They took away a lot of those, like, what are those some other dumb powers? Like, they, they took away the glasses he used to wear. It was like Superman's got glasses and it has an illusion of 80, and so they took away that. They basically explained it that he has an aura around his body, like a electromagnetic aura that prevents people from taking a good picture of him and seeing his facial features and stuff. It was dumb. You're That's Nightcrawler. You're you're that is Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler in the second X-Men movie that goes into the White House and bounces off the walls and teleports and kicks people and teleports again and punches somebody in the face and teleports and grabs a guy from behind and teleports up to a ceiling and drops him down. Yeah, that's Nightcrawler. Yeah, the kick-ass. That was one of the best. Oh, you're thinking of um, the character end up having the name Zero, and was played by Will.I.am in the X-Men Origins Wolverine movie, which you should never bring up ever again, ever. Amen. Yeah, it was a character that Logan went to find in the Wolverine Origins movie, and he had like a woven mesh cowboy hat on, played by Will.I.am. Yeah, and Deadman says there were several teleporters in X-Men, which annoys me because in the X-Men comics they actually have a ton of redundant characters, a ton of bricks, a ton of psychic characters, a ton of teleporters, a ton of shapeshifters. Uh, Yeah, and you're like, oh, every mutant is different except the ones that are the same. There's a blaster. There's a, they use the same tropes as well. I think even in Mutants and Mastermind, I think they use like 10 to 12 superhero tropes. There's the Brick, the Wizard, the Psy, the Totem, which is like the animalistic character, the Speedster, the Gadgeteer, the Power Armor, the Elementalist, basically the energy person or blaster, the Shapeshifter, and the Pugilist. I think that's 10, and there's probably two more that I'm missing. Um, yeah. Like, yeah, Plural's like, yeah, that's the one. Just thought the teleporting was neat. Yeah, exactly. But anyway, guys, we will go on about this. Of course, Discord Tuesday tomorrow is grab bag. I usually default to trying to come up with some gaming statistics on how to do these things. For example, you can have, just because someone can teleport doesn't necessarily mean it's instantaneous, much like Nightcrawler, the character Nightcrawler bamfing, as it's known, because that's how it was written in the comics, BAMF, bamfing around a region to do battle with minions and such. So how fast can someone teleport? Is it quiet? I'm actually stealing this a little bit from the movie Jumper, because the creators of the movie Jumper wanted to establish how jumping is possible. So they did a lot of that. So they had like does it disrupt the air? Can people hear it? What happens when you're doing it when you're distraught or injured or in a panic situation? Do you arrive where you want to? Does it set off car alarms? Does it crack the earth? Does it shatter light bulbs? Does it cause an EMP disruption, et cetera, et cetera? So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the gaming statistics in and of it. How can you teleport at the speed of thought? Do you just roll initiative and the security guard about to shoot you in the chest? If you lose your initiative, do you just get shot in the chest because you can't teleport that fast? Probably, but yeah. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining me. Your time is very valuable. I'm glad you could spend it here. I hope you're able to leave with a little bit of change. See ya.